we've had with the work of this new department and the development of the new research support unit, and all the support that you've demonstrated towards this work. So thank you again for taking the time to be here. So before we begin, we'd just like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Plains Cree, Woodland Cree, Swampy Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the Métis. We know we have people joining us from both Regina and Saskatoon, so again, thanks for joining us from wherever you are. Just want to take a moment to introduce the team and your presenters for today. So I'm Megan Vanstone, if you haven't had the opportunity to meet with me already. I am the director of our new department, Research Development and Strategy, and we are a department within the Division of Population Health, Quality and Research. So we get to benefit from Karen FMU's leadership. Special shout out to Cecilia McCormick, who is our administrative support and keeps us all organized and on track. I'd also like to introduce you to Charlene Basco. She is our new provincial manager of research support. She just joined the agency last month, so we've been vigorously onboarding her and throwing a million things at her at once, and she's done an incredible job of jumping right in and taking the lead of lots of that work. And finally, Jennifer Lay is our research approval coordinator. So she will be kind of the face of the research support unit. She will be the primary intake point for all of your questions and all of your research support needs. So I'm going to start off a bit of the presentation, and then I'm going to hand it over to my team members to carry us through some of the other elements. I also just want to acknowledge that our team has benefited from support from other areas as well. Our department specific unit is rather small at the moment. We're hoping to see that grow. We do also have team members in information management services. I just realized I put that name wrong on the slide. It's information management services, IMS, and our communications department. They've been instrumental at kind of helping us get set up, develop our intake tool, develop all of the processes, and make sure that all of you have an awareness of what's been going on. So thanks to those individuals as well. So just to give everybody a little bit of a reminder, if you attended my research vision presentation, or maybe this is new information to you, the scope of our new department for research development and strategy we kind of aim to tackle several things. So we are going to be overseeing the Cancer Agency's strategic direction for research. We're also going to be responsible for trying to increase our public awareness of the Cancer Agency's research program. We want to make sure people understand what we're doing, all the expertise that exists in this province, and all the hard work that's going on. And we also want to be able to build partnerships, develop funding and communication plans, and really just continue to develop and grow our existing research programming. So the focus of today, though, is one of our accountabilities, which is the development of support resources, training materials, infrastructure, and the creation of a new research support unit. So the purpose of this support unit is to really help centralize and streamline the way that we manage research intake and approval processes. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So first and foremost, we want to kind of address what's changing. You're probably wondering what the implications of having this new unit will be. One of the first changes you'll see is on the policy side of things. So some of you who have engaged in research before may be familiar with the policy called Intake and Approval of Requests to Access Saskatchewan Cancer Agency Data for Secondary Purposes. It's a mouthful for a policy title, but you might know it better as the DAC policy. So that policy is the mechanism that we've been using to coordinate intake of requests for research activity, requests for access to data for research, and that's all been managed by a data access committee. So one of the major changes that's happening is that we have created a new policy called Responsible Conduct of Research, and it will supersede the DAC policy. So the DAC policy is going away. That means the Data Access Committee in its current form is being decommissioned, we will not continue to operate in the same way as a committee. We'll still continue to engage people, and we'll talk more about that later. But just for your awareness, the last meeting for our Data Access Committee will be on November 13th. So there's one last opportunity to have projects that have already been submitted and are undergoing review to receive that approval from the Data Access Committee. And then we will be switching over and the new policy will come into effect. So we really do just want to thank everybody who has participated in the DAC process to date. It was so much hard work to develop that policy, to develop those processes, to oversee those processes. There were so many people engaged in the operation of that committee, and it really was a tremendous amount of work, and we really appreciate all of that work that really did lay the foundation and helped us understand, how we could evolve from that and how we could improve upon our existing processes. So just want to acknowledge those individuals as well. Another change you'll see on the policy front is for the clinical research policy side of things. So if you've done clinical trials, you might be aware of a series of policies specific to clinical research that outline the way that we identify trials, the way that we manage study startup activities, the expectations around how those trials are managed. The content of those policies is not going away, but it is going to be updated. So rather than being standalone policies, those are going to become clinical trial specific procedures that fall under the overarching responsible conduct of research policy. So that's work in progress. Those policy documents are still undergoing the necessary updates, and that will be communicated once those changes are finalized. And then finally, you are going to see some additional policies coming out of our unit for some of those research adjacent activities is what we're calling them. So they might not fit perfectly in that research box, but they might be the type of knowledge generating activity that's happening within the agency that would benefit from some clarity for policies and procedures for support. You're also going to see some changes in procedures to support the new policies. So the biggest change is that intake of all research-related requests is shifting to a centralized research support unit. So the research support unit will manage intake of all research-related requests and some of those research-adjacent requests. And Charlene is going to talk a little bit more about that a little later in the presentation. There is one exception to that, and that is clinical trials. So I already mentioned we have some existing policies and procedures fully formulated within the clinical research department. We're not looking at any major changes for that specific element of work right now. So that is one exception to this centralized intake model. And again, we'll speak a little bit more to that later. And finally, another big change in procedure is that we're moving towards an electronic application form. So we're really trying to develop an intake method that's catered to accommodate all different types of research requests, and kind of meets the researchers where they're at, regardless of where that is in project development. So again, we're going to talk about that later in today's presentation. What does that intake form look like, and how will we be managing that intake process? We've also been working really hard to improve the clarity around expectations for research. So one of the ways that we're doing that is developing a series of guideline documents. So the purpose of these documents is to really just make it clear right up front, what are the expectations for research to be conducted responsibly within the agency. So we're hoping that by making those guidance documents available for anyone who wants to conduct research involving the agency, we can better develop our projects around those guidelines. We will hopefully experience less back and forth trying to wade through what is expected and what people want to do, and really just increase that transparency and that clarity around what is responsible conduct. So we are making all of our policies, procedures, and guidelines publicly available So we acknowledge that a lot of research involving the agency is not necessarily driven by agency employees. So we wanted to kind of get away from that intranet staff room space, and we're creating a dedicated research support unit page on our public facing website. So any researcher who wants to engage us for research has access to that information and can gain that clarity of what we're doing and how we expect it to be done. So the website is just listed there. There are a few things that are not changing, so we just want to acknowledge those as well. As I mentioned, clinical trials, we're targeting right now the research support unit processes to address all the gaps in our existing support resources. So clinical trials, they're well supported through our clinical research department. We're not touching their processes, we're not touching their resourcing. We're really just trying to supplement above and beyond that. So all of that will remain with the clinical research department. And again, for clarity, in the the responsible conduct of research policy, we have a definition for research. We also have definitions for types of research, like clinical trials. So if you're wondering what constitutes a clinical trial, we have a definition for that. Another thing that's not changing is stakeholder engagement. So this really was one of the key elements of our previous DAC process, was to make sure that the people who are impacted by the work, the people who have the content expertise, and the people who need to approve the resources and determine whether or not a research request is feasible or whether they have capacity to support it, we need to make sure those people have an awareness of these projects, have an opportunity to review these projects, and can weigh in on whether or not they're feasible or will cause any concerns for their area. So that stakeholder engagement element, that consultation element, is still a really important part of the research support unit's processes. We're just streamlining the way that we do it a little bit. So if radiation therapy is not touched by a research project, they don't need to have an awareness of it. They don't need to be reviewing it. They don't need to be weighing in on it. If radiation therapy is impacted by the research, they will absolutely be consulted, and we will engage with them in a more informal way to make sure they have the information they need to inform their decision making. So we won't be relying on meeting schedules or committee activity, but rather just direct stakeholder consultation. I really just want to, I've touched on this point before in some of my previous communication. I really just want to drive it home again. Yes, we are creating a dedicated research support unit, but we will never fully address the full spectrum of research support needs in any one individual unit or department. So the focus of the research support unit, yes, we will have targeted policies, we will have guidance material, we will manage certain procedures, but we will have limits in terms of our dedicated resourcing and our own content expertise. So we will continue to connect researchers with the relevant partners to make sure that we are meeting their needs, we are identifying the appropriate support resources, and we are just improving that coordination element to better facilitate research. Another thing that's not changing is risk mitigation. So we have to acknowledge that these policies, these processes, I know sometimes there's frustration. They can be viewed as red tape or administrative barriers. We don't want to be a barrier. We are team research all the way. We want to see it happen as much as it possibly can. However, we are a trustee under HIPAA. We do have to meet certain legislative requirements to make sure that we're complying with the laws. We are a publicly funded organization, so we do have certain accountability to the public to make sure that we're managing our resources appropriately. We have a very important accountability to our patients to make sure that the research activity that's happening is being conducted in the safest way possible. We don't want to put them at any unnecessary risks or ask them to take on any level of risk that outweighs the potential benefit to them. And finally, if we want to be a reputable research organization, we have an accountability to the scientific community to make sure that the research that we're conducting is appropriately rigorous, that it meets all of the best practice standards in terms of methodology being used. And so we really just want to make sure that we're applying that lens to what we're doing as well. So, we talked a lot about what we're doing and all the different information. We're going to dive into the details of what those policy documents contain, what the procedures look like, and what it means to complete an intake form. I do want to really highlight that there's also a benefit to the researchers, not just the agency. So we want to make sure that by offering this centralized intake point, we have better coordination of support. There's less ambiguity around who do I talk to, when do I talk to them, who can approve this, who needs to be included. We're really trying to address that confusion or just improve the coordination side of it that way. Really trying to streamline these processes. Again, I mentioned we do have certain requirements to mitigate risk as an organization, but we can do that in a more efficient way. So we're trying to make things better that way. We really want to clarify expectations and standards, and hopefully by doing that, it makes the job of a researcher a little bit easier because they're not trying to guess at what does the agency support? How am I allowed to engage with patients if I want to recruit them to my research study? Where do I put up a poster? How do I put up a poster? Who do I talk to? So really trying to clarify that. Um, Having this centralized intake also really helps us because it allows us as an organization to develop this comprehensive inventory of research activity. So by having this inventory, now all of a sudden we can do a better job of reporting on how we're doing. What was the impact of the research that we conducted? When did we publish? How much money did we bring in? How many patients did we benefit? It really helps us highlight the success and the productivity of the program. And it also helps us identify where we maybe need a little more support so that we can further, dedicate time and energy towards bolstering that programming. And finally, we really want to provide a way to celebrate the work. People are working very hard. They're oftentimes doing research off the side of their desk. And we want to acknowledge that. We really want to celebrate that. And having that centralized point of contact to know what's going on really will help us do that. So I'm going to hand it over to Charlene now, and she is going to walk us through the new policies and procedures and tell you a little bit more about what those mean. So go ahead, Charlene.
Thanks, Megan. And thank you for that wonderful background. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlene Basco. As Megan mentioned, I'm the new Provincial Research Support Manager for the Research Support Unit. Today, I'll provide some high-level information on the policies and associated procedures of the Research Support Unit. For ease of reference, I'll refer to the Research Support Unit as RSU for the remainder of this presentation. So the first policy developed focuses on the responsible conduct of research at the SCA. The policy applies to all research projects conducted at the SCA or those that require access to SCA resources, including any facilities, staff, physicians, services, equipment, supplies, data, or patients and their personal and personal health information. The policy provides a definition for research and outlines what research includes and does not include. It also emphasizes responsible stewardship of resources and mandates compliance with ethical research standards, including approval from the Research Ethics Board and SCA's RSU before beginning research activities. Additionally, the policy is structured to establish the principles for the management of intellectual property generated from research activities, all research-related funding, any research-related conflicts of interest, and all incidents of research misconduct. Currently, some of the related policies and pieces are still in development or yet to be developed, for example, an intellectual property policy. In any case, Prior review of this policy is advised before applying for research grants or starting any new research projects. So here are the procedures associated with this policy that have been developed and approved to date. So we have the research support and approval procedure, reporting and investigating misconduct, approval of research project amendments, and submitting research project updates procedure. I will provide further details on each of the procedures. However, to preface, we have designed these procedures and are refining corresponding work standards with an emphasis on minimizing effort for researchers and involved departments. Our goal is to make the research process more streamlined and accessible, fostering a more enjoyable and less burdensome experience. Through this approach, we aim to enhance research engagement by alleviating administrative barriers that may otherwise hinder participation. So the first procedure I'll talk about is in regards to research support and approval. So this procedure is designed to offer researchers a structured pathway to engage with the RSU for consultation and comprehensive support throughout the entire research lifecycle, as well as to streamline research approval on behalf of the SCA. This process initiates our collaboration, with researchers beginning by submitting an electronic intake form for the relevant service required. This form, which will be accessible via the SCA Research Support Unit webpage, will enable the RSU to manage the remainder of the process. The RSU will act as the central contact for researchers and project team members, coordinating communications with stakeholders to facilitate an efficient feasibility assessment. This targeted approach ensures that departments receive only the precise information needed to authorize the use of their resources for a research project. The RSU will also manage study documentation in an organized manner to reduce email volume, prevent miscommunications, and expedite approval timelines, thereby providing researchers with a high level of support. The outcome of this procedure is a comprehensive letter of approval, either for a new study or an amendment to an existing study, that consolidates approvals from all relevant departments, authorizing the commencement of the research project. Our intake process is designed to enable RSU engagement at any stage of the research lifecycle, whether in the initial proposal drafting and budget development, or for modifications to a study such as adding a team member. The next procedure here is for reporting and investigating misconduct. This procedure establishes the steps for reporting and investigating allegations of research misconduct, as defined in the Responsible Conduct of Research Policy. All reported incidents of misconduct will be investigated. Anyone aware of actual or suspected misconduct must report it to the designate, which is the Director of Research Development and Strategy. The person under investigation will be informed of the allegations and given an opportunity to respond. If misconduct is confirmed, actions will be taken to address it, with measures to protect participant safety, research integrity, and the SCA's legal and financial interests. If an allegation is unfounded, effort will be made to protect or restore the subject's reputation. The next procedure is for the approval of research project amendments. This procedure outlines the process for making modifications, such as extensions, protocol amendments, additional SCA resources, study closures, etc., to previously approved and ongoing research projects. Researchers must complete an intake form to specify any project changes. For projects initially approved by the Data Access Committee, or DAC, amendments may be submitted through this process by including the DAC assigned identifier. Ongoing communication will ensure that all required information is relayed accurately and researchers are informed of decisions ahead of time. Based on the project feasibility assessment, researchers may need to adjust specific elements such as resource support, costing, or renewals from the Research Ethics Board. Once adjustments are made, a signed amended letter of approval or an LOA or notice of closure will be issued to the researcher. My light just turned off, so sorry about that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next procedure here is for submitting research project updates. So this is actually a new procedure under the Responsible Conduct of Research policy, and it's designed to ensure that all research is documented and tracked to assess organizational impact, report on activities, and demonstrate accountability to the public, funders, and patients, as Megan had previously touched upon. Its purpose is to guide researchers in fulfilling the terms of their letter of approval, which requires the submission of annual progress reports to the Research Support Unit. Additionally, this procedure allows researchers to provide updates on project outcomes, such as publications or other research outputs, enabling the RSU to identify and showcase research achievements. The intake process mirrors that of previously established procedures where the researchers complete an intake form and submit all supporting documentation. The RSU will also coordinate the submission of all publications to the Communications Department to promote awareness and celebrate the successes of research projects. So, an associated procedure that's currently under development is the Documenting Discovery Research Projects procedure. Recognizing the unique requirements of discovery research, we are working to establish a more tailored documentation procedure that aligns with the department's needs. This process will be developed in close collaboration with the team to ensure it is both effective and efficient for their workflow. The following guideline documents are associated with the Responsible Conduct of Research policy and are available to all individuals initiating a research project. Each individual conducting or supporting research is responsible for thoroughly reviewing these documents to understand and ensure adherence to the applicable standards and regulations. The first guideline document that I'll talk about is in regards to um, the applicable standards and regulations. So the purpose of this document is to outline the most common standards and regulations applicable to the responsible conduct of research. It provides information on the ethical conduct of research, authorship of scholarly work, compliance with legislation, compliance with any applicable contracts, and compliance with other SCA policies. The purpose of the next one, sorry, the purpose of the next document is for the collection, use, and disclosure of personal health information for research. And it is to provide guidelines regarding, again, the collection, use, and disclosure of a patient's personal health information for research according to the Health Information Protection Act, or HIPAA, and any related legislation. The next one there is for the data management. So the purpose of this data management guidelines is to provide guidelines regarding the management of research data, including but not limited to capture, storage, and retention. And the last one is for research misconduct. The purpose of this document is to provide guidance on addressing research misconduct as outlined in the Responsible Conduct of Research policy. Research misconduct is a serious issue that requires prompt and careful action to mitigate any potential harm to participants, the agency, the research team, and/or research partners. It is essential to recognize that responsibility lies with both the investigators conducting research and the supporting institutions to foster an environment that promotes responsible conduct in research. All right, so the second policy that we have established is the documentation and approval of case studies policy, which applies to individuals seeking to conduct a case study involving personal health information within the trusteeship of the SCA. This policy defines what constitutes a case study and ensures that all activities are conducted appropriately and in compliance with HIPAA. It is important to clarify that case studies differ from research. This is an example of a research adjacent policy that will leverage the expertise and infrastructure within the RSU to address a current gap within the agency. For the purposes of this policy, a case study refers to a detailed investigation involving fewer than 3 patients, aimed at describing and disseminating information that may enhance understanding within a specific area of clinical practice. When exempt from Research Ethics Board review, case studies are not classified as research under the Responsible Conduct of Research policy. All right, so the associated procedure for the case study policy is the documenting and approval of case studies procedure. And this procedure aims to facilitate compliance, like I said, with the policy and its associated SCA privacy and access guidelines for case studies. It is important to note that although case studies are not considered to be research, the RSU will continue to serve as the intake point and manage the procedure to document and approve this type of study. So another guideline here that I want to highlight is the case studies guidelines. So before initiating contact with a patient for the purpose of conducting a case study, applicants are required to review the case studies guideline that will be made available on the RSU webpage. The purpose of this guideline document is to offer direction on the collection, use, and disclosure of a patient's personal health information in the context of conducting a case study. The document outlines the applicability of the Health Information Protection Act to the collection, use, and disclosure of personal health information under specific conditions relevant to case studies. Additionally, it includes essential information on obtaining patient consent and provides a template consent form that may be utilized for conducting a case study. So I've been referencing the intake form in almost all of my slides. So now I would like to take some time for you to view and get familiar with it. Jennifer Lay, our research approval coordinator, will provide a detailed overview of the process for using the intake form.
Charlene. So, how to submit the intake form? If you access our website at sascancer.ca/research/research-support-unit, you will find our policies, procedures, guidelines, and the link that takes you to our intake form. You may also enter the website directly at ca.research.net/r/RSU intake. This will take you to our welcome page on the form, which also includes disclaimers about how to fill out the form, as well as who to contact if you require any assistance. Now, our first question is whether the individual accessing this form is the PI, and note, anyone on your team can submit this form. Simply answer yes or no, and then click Next. This will bring you to the contact information page, where we ask that you provide the PI's title, name, primary affiliation, and email address. Again, if you are not the PI, we also have additional fields to fill out your contact information as well. We collect the same fields as well as the applicant's role in the project. Now, the applicant is the individual completing/submitting the intake form, and their project role is the type of relationship/involvement that the applicant has with the project. This could be a student, support personnel, co-investigator, project team member, and any other role not mentioned. So after you fill out the contact information page, click Next, and this will take you to the activity page. Here we give options of the types of activities you would like to perform. Submit a grant application for review/endorsement, conduct a research project, conduct a case study, make changes to an existing project, other, and we ask that you please specify. And let's say you would like to conduct a research project. Simply select that option and hit Next. Depending on the option you choose for activity, this will take you to your activity-specific pages, where we first ask that you read the policies and confirm that you have understood them prior to continuing. Again, these documents can be found on our website or on the staff room. Now, what if I want to do a research project, but I'm unsure where to start? Well, you can actually choose that as an option, unsure/need consultation, and then click Next. You will have the opportunity to tell us what you hope to achieve, and the RSU will connect with you to help figure out the rest, and then click Next. Now, we recognize that the RSU may not have all the resources you need. This is where the coordination piece comes in using our research support network, where we review the intake form and connect with the appropriate departments and individuals, such as our research officer, Ambika, in our clinical research department, or our epidemiologists, or support resources external to the agency, such as the University of Saskatchewan or Saskatchewan Health Authority, to determine if we can meet your support needs. Let's say you're interested in clinical trials specifically. If you choose that as an option, we will redirect you to Lynn Dwornachuk, Director of Clinical Research, as clinical trial selection and startup are managed by the SCA's Clinical Research Department. Now that we have discussed research projects, including clinical trials, let's say you're interested in conducting a research-related activity like a case study. As Charlene explained, case studies do not meet the definition of research, but we're able to leverage the infrastructure/expertise within the RSU to make sure they're supported. Select the option and hit Next, and we ask you review our policy and associate procedures and guideline, as well as attach draft copy of the consent form, which we have provided a template for in those governance documents. Lastly, we will have a terms and conditions page for certain activities chosen, just to ensure that the information you have provided is accurate and complete to the best of your abilities, that the PI has reviewed and approved of the content submitted on their behalf, and that you will notify the RSU of any amendments through the RSU intake form. Afterwards, simply click that you agree, and then you're done. Now, the main takeaway is that at any stage of your project, access the RSU intake form, submit your contact information and details of the project, and our unit will work with you. We want to discuss your project goals, coordinate resources where needed, and help ensure that your project is set up for success. Earlier engagement better helps set you up for success, such as earlier stakeholder engagement, time for external lengthier processes, for example, contracts, and our ability to assess and potentially assist in project proposal developments.
Thanks so much, Jennifer, for a great walkthrough. So the RSU is continued to expand as we work on the following buckets of work. So there's more to come. I wanted to highlight a few of them. The first one is the Management of Research Funds policy and its associated procedures and guidelines. I've alluded to this earlier during the first part of the presentation, but the policy would apply to any SCA staff or physicians applying for or in receipt of third-party funding to support a research project and requiring administration by the agency. The policy and procedures have been drafted and will still require approval from affected departments. The second one there is an updated method for documenting agreements for disclosure of confidential information for research activities internal to the agency. So a standard terms and conditions document for disclosure of confidential information for research is another document, like I said, that is currently in the works. This would apply to internal SCA researchers requiring access to confidential information held by the SCA. It is being developed in collaboration with the Privacy and Legal Department to clearly outline the obligations, proper usage, and disclosure of confidential information, which must be acknowledged by the researcher. The purpose of this document is to streamline the process by eliminating the need for a lengthy research agreement in these circumstances, thereby enhancing efficiency for all parties involved. Um, the third one there is the development of guidelines for surveys, policy, to address non-research surveys. Inappropriate conduct of surveys was identified as a gap in agency policies and processes several years ago, and many have contributed their insight to a working group on this topic. The RSU will be taking accountability for oversight of survey activity, and policy, procedure, and guideline development will follow in the coming months. Lastly, we are exploring the acquisition of an information management tool designed to enhance our research management capabilities in the near future. This tool aims to facilitate more efficient communication with researchers and stakeholders while reducing rework on our part and minimizing the volume of emails received by both researchers and stakeholders. Additionally, we anticipate that the tool will function as a database for collecting relevant key performance indicators, which can be utilized to better assess resource needs. As previously mentioned, upon becoming operational, we will implement an interim electronic intake form powered by SurveyMonkey. The link to this form will be available on the SCA Research Support Unit webpage. Feedback from test users indicate that the form meets our current operational requirements. However, we acknowledge its limitations and are carefully documenting these insights for inclusion in our business needs document for the long-term solution. So to highlight, our go live date is November 12th. So please watch out for that. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time and attention during this information session. We recognize the patience you've demonstrated to our team as we work hard to develop an efficient process for research administration and support at the SCA. And for that, we thank you. All right, so now I'm opening the floor for any questions or comments you may have. I've also included our contact information on this slide, so feel free to contact any one of us at any time. Alternatively, I have included our general inbox, which is rsu@sascancer.ca for any general inquiries you may have.
Hey, Cecilia, I'll maybe ask you to stop the recording, and then we will launch into questions here. So I'm just going to scroll down our